Hey everybody, welcome to the pre-show for my first impression stream tonight. This is Professor DM Gallivan, and we are going to be talking about the new source book from Wizards of the Coast called Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos. I'm going to give you kind of an overview of the source book, take you through the contents of the chapters, give you some of my impressions overall of the book, what I like about it, things I don't like about it, and then look at some of the creatures, just a very cursory glance at the creatures, and at the end I'll be announcing the creature that will be featured in Monday night's Monster Monday, a creature that comes out of this source book. So, settle in for the rest of the pre-show. Got about 10 minutes. You guys can throw questions into the chat, either in pre-show or as we go. Anything that you want to know about the source book that I might be able to tell you or show you, and we'll get started at the top of the hour. I'm going to mute myself for now and let you listen to this music from Sirenscape. This is from a sound set called Friendly Tavern, and this particular set of tracks is Musicians Play for Mead. Alright, so we'll chat in a couple of minutes. I don't have a drink tonight, I have drinks. Because I am anticipating these first impressions tend to run a little bit long. And don't worry, when the archive goes up on YouTube, I'll go ahead and put the chapters in it. And I'll also be trimming off the pre-show as well. So, when you watch the archive later on YouTube, it'll have just the content. And by the way, if you're joining us on YouTube for the stream, please go ahead and like the stream, subscribe to the channel, share the news about it, click the post notification bell so that you get notified every time new content drops on the channel. And if you are joining us on Twitch, please go ahead and follow us or subscribe to us on Twitch as well. It'd be much appreciated. Hey viewers, thank you for joining us. Six Flags. Hope you're having a great Friday. Remember, with our topic being the introduction to Strixhaven, if you have any questions about that new sourcebook, go ahead and drop those in the chat so that I can look at them and respond to them throughout the show tonight. We will get started at the top of the hour. Hello viewers, we'll get started with the stream proper. At the top of the hour, tonight I'm going to be giving you guys my first impressions of the new Strixhaven Sourcebook. And the music you're listening to is from Sirenscape. It's from the sound set known as Friendly Tavern. We'll have that going during the pre-show. Hope y'all are having a great Friday. Hey, Leah. Glad you could join us this evening. Remember, if you're watching over on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the stream, tell other people about the stream, click the post notification bell so you get notified every time we post a new stream or post a new video. And then if you're watching over on Twitch, subscribe to the channel, follow the channel, tell your friends about us. We have some live play D&D several nights a week, and then a Monster Monday stream, and occasional direct-to-YouTube videos, as well as some special streams from time to time, like this, when they release a new sourcebook. Alright, I'm going to turn the background music down a little bit and bring us over to this setting. Welcome everybody to this special live stream. Tonight I am Professor DM Galabond, and since class is in session, we are going to be looking at an overview, my first impressions of the brand new sourcebook for D&D 5th edition that dropped this week, entitled Strixhaven, a Chaos of Curriculum. Now, this is one of several sourcebooks that they have released in 5th edition that has a direct tie-in to the other side of Wizards of the Coast that produces the Magic the Gathering game. This one is related to the this one is related to the Strixhaven expansion that was released in April of 2021. Alright, so my first impressions of Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos. We're going to look at these slides here for a bit, and then I'll dive in and take a look at some stuff from the book. Alright, so Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos. This is an adventure that's heavily inspired by Harry Potter, and that should be kind of evident even just from looking at the title art. It really kind of evokes the whole Harry Potter. Okay, you're at a magical academy or a school of magic or something like that. The difference here is that Strixhaven is envisioned as sort of a 4-year university. Now, for those folks that are not from the U.S., traditionally college universities here in the U.S. have a 4-year curriculum, if you will. People go from freshmen in their first year, sophomores in their second year, juniors in their third year, and then seniors in their fourth year. And this is a thing that, okay, come on. All right. There, that's what I was looking for. All right. In this one, you go from your first year as a student where you're just kind of learning your way around campus and a few little things happen, to by the time you're in the fourth year, you are sort of the heroes of the campus and you have to stop an unspeakable evil that could spell the doom for hundreds of students and faculty across the entire school. All right. Setting is based on Magic the Gathering expansion called Strixhaven, School of Mages, that was released in April 2021. This source book is going to be one that a lot of DMs will love and a lot of DMs will dislike. And there's many different reasons for that. So tonight I'll give you some of my personal likes and dislikes about the book, as well as things I think will help me personally help players that struggle with character creation, because there are some kind of interesting ideas that you can put from this book, you can put into play to sort of enrich the whole character creation process. I'll also provide an opinion on how this book can serve as a template if you have always wanted to create a campaign setting where the adventurers have to have formal training. So many newer players who have only played in 5th edition don't realize that in early editions of the game, a lot of downtime was expected between adventures for PCs to find a mentor and train. And yes, that training required paying gold out of the treasure that you had gotten on your other adventures, and you have to pay these NPC mentors in order to gain skills and explain the new abilities that you receive at each level. In 5e, it's more explained as sort of on-the-job training. If you're a spellcaster, then during downtime, you're kind of reading notes or practicing new somatic movements or working on the verbal components or sort of getting new insights from your patron or your deity that are all preparing you that when you hit that next level, well, now you have these new spells that you can cast. And in the same way, for non-spellcasting classes, whether you're a rogue or a fighter or something of that nature, you're practicing things during downtime, doing exercises or, working forms with your weapon or stuff like that, that is sort of allowing you, when you reach that threshold of a new level, okay, now there's these new feats or these new skills or these new abilities that have been unlocked that are part of your next level in your class progression. If you've always wondered how you would turn training into a more formalized way, we can kind of look at the Strixhaven as something of a template and get at least some ideas that would be applicable to all classes and not just spellcasters or wizards or mages. All right. So I'll go and just briefly summarize the contents of the Strixhaven sourcebook. This image here is one of the early. It's not really a map as much as kind of a stylized poster layout, if you will, of the organization of the campus. There's 5 different colleges within the Strixhaven, and those 5 colleges, together with the central library and student center, make up the entire university. And so each of these sort of satellite drawings represents one of the various colleges that are in the university itself. So there's an introduction in a book, and it sets some presumptions that underpin the rest of the contents. So it stresses that Strixhaven is a cosmopolitan university for spellcasters and mages. It also mentions in passing the world named Arcavios and the continent called Orithia that the Magic the Gathering lore masters used for the setting of the expansion over in that game. So you kind of get a couple of insights about that, and we'll look briefly at that before we dive into the actual book itself. And it also tells about some of the unique features of the world that impact the campus and provides a sketch of the university's founders. So there's every world, every plane, if you will, in D&D, every game setting, every plane in Magic the Gathering, they have within their lore slightly different ways of explaining how magic works and how magic is achieved in that area. There's one explanation for magic in Eberron, different explanation for magic in Dark Sun, different explanation for magic in the Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk, and so on and so forth. All right, so there's also an explanation for how magic works in this world. Now, obviously, if you're running a homebrew campaign and you want to take Strixhaven and set it in your homebrew campaign, then you might have to do a little bit of substitution or fiddling, or if your players have played other characters in other campaigns in that world and they're already familiar with it, okay, well, then they know how all those mechanics work, and they're just used to the way that things happen in your game world. All right, so that's the introduction of the book. Now, the chapter 1 of the book provides something of an overview that is geared primarily for DMs to help us as DMs create an atmosphere of a fantasy university for our players. Includes various maps of the colleges that make up the university, information on the philosophy of study at Strixhaven, and introduction to some of the key faculty members that are in the that will appear throughout the adventure, because it does have a level 1 through 10 campaign that is part of the Strixhaven book that basically takes the characters from baby adventurers, first year students, all the way up through graduation as some of the most renowned heroes to ever come out of the university once they are level 10. All right, so that is the first chapter. Now, chapter 2 provides options primarily for players. So this includes a new playable race of Owlfolk, talks about how you can choose a college for your character, introduces some new backgrounds and feats for 5th edition, and also some new spells and magic items for 5th edition. And there's also a new twist here in that you can build a party of PCs that are all brand new students enrolling in the university. So that means taking into account a new way of creating characters, such as building a character from a Magic the Gathering card. Now, Magic the Gathering's been around since 1993, and there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of D&D players over the years that they were inspired by a card. They unwrapped from a box or an expansion pack for Magic the Gathering to go, ooh, I want that to be my character. And they went to their DM and they said, please, 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 can I play this character? I want to play this character. I want to build this character. Help me build this character. So that's been going on forever. Well, now Wizards of the Coast is finally acknowledging, yes, that's happening. And they don't give you a lot of guidance on it, but they, bless that as, okay, if you're somebody that has to tell you that the rules allow you to do something, then yes, you're allowed to do that. No, I've always been somebody that looks at the rules and goes, okay, these are guidelines, and I sort of take what I want and ignore what I don't want, and run my games that way. All right, so chapters 3 through 6. These chapters contain a full campaign for character levels 1 through 10 that's presented in the guise of 4 years of study and curriculum that the adventures on and near the campus of the university. It's these chapters that we're going to mine for ideas for other D&D training academies, and these chapters that hold some of my least favorite aspects of the adventure. So, I mean, there's some things I really like about it, and I kind of understand why they did it in terms of building it as a campaign, but there's something I feel that's a little fundamentally broken about this, and I'll talk about that later on. All right, so now we're going to detail each of those chapters. Chapter 3, this starts the campaign and details events and courses from the party's first year. This campaign sets up session 0 as sort of a campus orientation. So your character creation becomes kind of an orientation to the campus at Strixhaven. And provides information on courses, exams, extracurricular activities, and campus jobs that students can have while taking classes. Courses and exams do have an impact on this campaign. And the way that works is that good marks on exams translate to advantage in certain combat and non-combat encounters, while positive relationships with other students, NPCs, and faculty can provide some bonus dice in certain circumstances. So this chapter 3, covers levels 1 through 3 of your character's adventure and career. Chapter 4 continues the story from year 1 and introduces sports as an extracurricular activity. It also continues the story of the campaign that began in year 1 and shows how the dangers thwarted then were only the beginning of more serious trouble to come. And this chapter covers levels 4 and 5 of your adventuring career. Now, chapter 5 continues the campaign through levels 6 and 7. In the third year, the story of corruption and sabotage at the university gets more deadly, and the big extracurricular activity is a dance known as the Magister's Masquerade, which, the way it's presented, it feels a whole lot like a high school prom. Now, I went to a big state university, and there was never anything kind of like a formal dance for the student body. I don't know if maybe some people, if they went to like Ivy League schools or small private colleges or something like that, where they do have, like cotillions or dances or formal balls or things of that nature that are part of the campus culture. But at my university, it never was. The closest thing that it feels like to me is like a super elaborate version of a high school prom. There's also chances that rivalries between the PCs and NPC students will heat up to the point of students facing magical duels in an area that's saturated with wild magic. And what that means is that those magic duels have results that are truly unpredictable. you may cast the spell perfectly, but there's a wild magic surge and something really unexpected happens. Good, bad, or indifferent. Chapter and third year culminate with the revelation that the strange behavior of one of the deans of the university was caused by a cursed item created by a former student that has an axe to grind and many potent hostile spells. With Strixhavens and the PCs, who by this time the PCs have become the star students of the university. And then in Chapter 6, this continues the campaign to its conclusion, levels 8 through 10. In this chapter, the fourth-year students are forced to be the last line of defense for the university against the foe revealed in Chapter 5 that intends to discredit and destroy the university and kill as many people on campus as possible. Ultimately, the PCs are excused from classes in order to hunt down and stop the foe that presents a clear and present danger to everyone on campus. And the reason why the students are asked to do this is that the enemy has cleverly set it up so that the effects of his magic are immune to the spells cast by the faculty, who are supposed to be the most powerful mages on the campus. So naturally, if the faculty are thwarted, then it's up to the students to go and save the day. And you know what that feels like? I mean, I love the guy on the Acquisition Incorporated games that he's played. I love his guest appearances on Critical Role. I love a lot of the D&D related stuff that Will Wheaton has done. But there's always going to be a part of me that's always going to remember Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher. Wesley Crusher, the sort of Deus Ex Machina character that so many times as an untrained sort of boy genius savant, had to rescue the Enterprise when all the bridge officers and all of the trained people that had been through Starfleet Academy couldn't come up with an answer. Oh, hey, Wesley, you can save the day. And it's like, I kind of dislike when things set that up. Oh, well, all of us who are supposed to know what to do, we can't do anything about it. Well, let's turn it over to this genius prodigy and let them deal with it. At least they wait until you're a senior, so you've got a lot of training in your fourth year, and you are among the most powerful. You're in the most powerful class of students, and you are sort of the star pupils of that class when you finally get to this point in the adventure. So it's one thing that kind of annoys me a bit about this. All right. So now we're going to go take a look through the book. But as I mentioned before, prior to doing that, we are going to dig into the web page here from the Magic the Gathering wiki, and we're going to look a little bit at Strixhaven, the School of Mages, which is the Magic the Gathering set that this one is based on. So we talked about the fact that this introduces a brand new world, or a brand new plane called Arcavios. And Arcavios has two suns, and the Strixhaven University is in a cosmopolitan area on the populated northern continent. I believe it's the northern continent. And one of the things that happened here is that there were two planes of existence, or two worlds, that merged in some kind of bizarre and unique way. So they merged in a way that's different than Abir and Toril merged in the plane of Forgotten Realms. Right. All right. Just so we're clear here. It was a different way than that merged. So ley lines of each world, conduits of mana, they were in such a way that the different colors of magic met in areas that caused snarls, and that's kind of tangles in the different oppositional elements of magic that make up the white, black, red, green, and blue mana that powers all of the spells in the Magic the Gathering multiverse. So there were 5 elder dragons of Arcavios that were born from these snarls, and a millennia after, and then millennia later, they founded Strixhaven University at the epicenter of these snarls. So there's this big element in the middle of campus that's known as a snarl, and that snarl is kind of a place where the magic of the mana in Magic the Gathering works a little bit differently, and it's kind of obliquely talked about in the campaign, but there's it doesn't seem like it plays a central role. The central role is with a villain that has an axe to grind with the university. And then there's all kinds of different information about the history and everything of the plane that really doesn't touch on our adventure. I just wanted people to know that in the Magic the Gathering wiki there is a whole detailed article about the setting. So if you intend to run Strixhaven and you are going to set it on its original world, there's a very detailed resource that you can go and find all kinds of other information, and then that would let you, that would help you when you're doing backgrounds for where the characters are from and things that they would know about the world from growing up there, and yada yada yada, all that kind of stuff. All right. So this is obviously the table of contents from D&D Beyond. Then life at Strixhaven is the first chapter. So it has information about magical study. There's principles and polarities. So each of the 5 schools, they detail 2 topics in each of the 5 schools, and there's also sort of an oppositional philosophy from the major professors that are introduced that the PCs will interact with. And so there's 2 levels of faculty. There's instructors, who are people at the beginning of their teaching career, and then at the end of a provisional period, which lasts from 1 to several years, an instructor is either let go or they are tenured, in which case they become full professors. And then the students, in the first year, they're all part of the general student population that is expected to take classes from multiple colleges. But then starting in their second year, they kind of specialize in sort of declaring a major, if you will, if you're familiar with the American university system. They declare a major in one of the 5 colleges, which means that they'll primarily take courses in that college, but they still may from time to time have courses that are in other colleges. And in fact, in every year there is one required course that all of the PCs have to take And the reason is because that particular course has something to do with the various difficulties and challenges and things that the PCs will face during the course of that academic year in the campaign. There's dormitories that are in the central campus, and the first year students normally live there. Once they declare a major, if you will, or choose a college, most of the time they go and live in a dormitory on that campus, although some students beyond their first year will stay on the central campus dormitories as resident advisors to new incoming students. And once you choose a college, every student is assigned 2 different counselors, and these counselors will be from opposing philosophies. So one may be chaotic, one may be lawful, and they will often give conflicting advice. And the idea there is, because they're giving you conflicting advice, and hopefully both of those sets of advice sound good, it forces the students to ultimately make the decision for themselves, and based on what information they know, instead of having a counselor tell you what you should do. Or a set of counselors telling you what you should do. And it's like, well, doing this would be good for yada, yada, yada. And then you talk to the other counselor, and they say doing that, and they make a very compelling argument, and it's just almost exactly the opposite of what the first person said. So 2 good options, but I can't do both, so I gotta pick which one. Course of study. You spend almost all of your remaining school years on campus and study with those professors, but you will have occasional studies in other campus. After Strixhaven, you can have 4 years of training, but you can go for advanced studies, just like people who go to get master's degrees or PhDs or something like that at universities in the US. And then some of them will turn right around after graduation and become instructors and go on to have a career in academia. All right, so then there's administration, there's a guidance counselor, there's a couple of deans that figure in the campaign as NPCs that you'll run across. And then there are mascots. And each college has a mascot. And it's been so long since I've watched Harry Potter. I can't remember whether those owls that the main characters in that series had, whether the owls were something that were unique to their particular house. I think it was is how they were divided in house, read, college or dormitory or whatever, or whether the owls were something that all the students had regardless of which house they were in. So these mascots, they have different kinds, or each college has different kinds of mascots. So Lorehold has a spirit statue, Prismari has art elementals, Quandrix has fractal mascots, Silverquill has inkling mascots, and Witherbloom has pest mascots. And they act as companions for students and faculty, and they sometimes serve as willing subjects for experiments or demonstrations. And they can occasionally even help out in a duel or more serious combat situation. So it's kind of like a familiar is maybe the way to think of the mascots. It can do things that sort of a familiar could do, and however they are a bit more substantial than most familiars, which usually have like 1 hit point or 2 hit points or something like that, and can do some some potentially useful things. All right, so here's a view of the central campus, and then sort of that, one of those, what the heck were they called? One of those snarls. It's kind of this is emblematic of one of the snarls at the center of the campus that is kind of on this world. So obviously, if you're not running the campaign in this particular world, if you're running it in your own homebrew world, then you might have to modify that slightly if something like that just wouldn't make sense to be in your particular world. And then we have the central campus with the map and sort of all of the areas that are off of it, and kind of the different places that people will find. So the Biblioplex is kind of the big central library in the middle of campus. Arrowjaunt Field, Bows Inn Tavern, Archway Commons, Firejolt Cafe, Captain Dapplewig's Manor, Strixhaven Stadium, which, of course, in different years of the adventure, different chapters of the campaign, some of those locations feature more prominently, and some of them are kind of more or less hubs that campus life swirls around throughout the entire time that students are there at the university. And then there's kind of some details about those locations, the Lorehold, and then it gets into the Lorehold College. So each college, the studies and the philosophy that are there, and the different scholars that are there, and kind of people that you might run into. And in Lorehold, the oppositional forces are order and chaos. So you have order and chaos, and then there's the different faculty that you may have classes with, and then a map of the Lorehold campus and the different areas there. So then you have the Prismari, studies in philosophy, which are perfection and expression. Prismati is kind of the art college, if you will, both performing arts and art like painting and sculpture and those types of things. So the oppositional philosophies are perfection and expression, and then information on the faculty and the campus locations and those types of things. Then we have Quandrix, which studies substance and theory. And so then once again, you have a different list of the different kinds of scholars you might run into, kind of an exterior view of the campus, and then a map of where the campus is, and all of the places that are on there. Silver Quill College is kind of the College of Eloquence, and so it's mages who are stylish, intimidating, and driven, or masters of magic of words. So Radiance and Shadow are the studies, and then there's the different scholars you would find there, and the faculty that you'll find there, some exterior views, and then a map of the campus. And then let's see, in the row stage over here, so there's different kinds of venues and everything. And then we have the Witherbloom. So Witherbloom is growth and decay, and it's like the hey, Frosted Druid, welcome, glad you could join us tonight. So studies in philosophy of Witherbloom include growth and decay, and the two deans are usually called the Dean of Root and the Dean of the Vein. The scholars will either study magic to enhance the abilities of the living, or magic that uses the life force to animate the dead. So in 5th edition and in some other editions of D&D, all either healing or necrotic damaging spells are considered the school of necromancy. And this is kind of those two sides of that same coin. So if you look at spell tags for things like Cure Wounds in D&D, it'll say it's from the I think Cure Wounds is still listed as School of Necromancy, but it because basically what it's doing is it's manipulating the life force of the universe in order to provide healing to this person that is your either ally or companion or some schmuck that got hurt by a falling beam, and you're being Mr. Ms. Nice Guy, Nice Gal, and helping them out. All right, so then there's some of the faculty, some of the students, and the map of the college there. So that is sort of the whole orientation thing with this chapter, which I believe that is all through chapter 1. Now, chapter 2, this is the new character options that we have there. So there's a new race that they introduce, which is kind of an owl folk race. There's information on or advice on how you can build a character for adventuring in Strixhaven. So that's sort of how would you imagine the character creation process as someone who is enrolling in a university for academic magical study. And then Strixhaven background, so different backgrounds. Then there's some new feats, some new spells, and some new magic items. And I say new, and these are all new for D&D 5th edition. A lot of times, spells that show up in 5e and some of these will be spells that had been in previous editions of D&D, and they just hadn't worked out how to bring them to 5e yet. And sometimes they are brand new spells that have never been in D&D in any edition. In this case, I think there's probably going to be more spells that are completely brand new to D&D because of the fact that the source of this is a Magic the Gathering expansion. So you have sort of something that's outside the D&D proper multiverse that is responsible for generating the inspiration for these spells, if you will, by the creators of the Sourcebook. All right, so the Owlin is a race, and just like the Aarakocra, it's a race that gets flying off the bat. And they have a few different restrictions on there, like if you wear medium or heavy armor, guess what? Your flight ability doesn't work, because I don't care how strong you are, you can't fly with medium or heavy armor. So, things of that nature. And so all, it's just all the standard stuff, what traits you have, the size, the speed, that type of stuff. Now, one of the cool things that the Owlin get is they have silent feathers. So if you've ever been out anywhere and seen owls flying in the wild, you'll know that there's a property about their feathers that makes them nearly silent, even when they are flying relatively fast, and it lets them get the jump on prey. So in D&D, with this Owlin race, it winds up giving you proficiency on your stealth skill, regardless of what class you are, because of the silent feathers feature that you have. Then there's choosing a college gives you kind of advice on building your character, and then talks a little bit about building an entire party of characters that are going to be adventurers here, and it says that that while it's a college or while it's a university for mages, it doesn't mean that everybody, it's not like you're building a party of 5 wizards that are all going to go get their butts kicked the first time they run into, something that bites real hard or hits real hard. There can be other kinds of classes that would attend Strixhaven because of different ways that their class abilities intersect with the study of magic. So then there's some new backgrounds. There's a background for each of the colleges. So once you choose a college, you can choose that. Student of that college as your background. So it gives you some skill proficiencies, languages, equipment, a feature, and then some spells that if you're a spellcasting, these become class spells for you regardless of what class you are. And then there's some personality traits, trinkets, yada yada yada. And it's the same for all of those colleges. Then we have, all right, let's see here. Decay and Reborn, isn't that just the Circle of Fungus Druid? It kind of is very much like the Circle of Fungus Druid in a different guise. But of course, this is something inspired and coming out of the Magic the Gathering tradition. So they have their own little twist on things and whatnot. Now, there's some new feats. And one of the feats is Strixhaven Initiate. So you basically the background feature that was in those other listings for each college, that is a feat that you can choose to take. Then you have Strixhaven spells, cantrips and first level spells that go along as part of each of the particular colleges, depending on which one you declare. Then there is a Strixhaven mascot. Once you achieve 4th level, and if you have taken the Strixhaven Initiate feat, you now have learned how to summon a mascot. So it's kind of, again, it kind of works a little bit like a familiar. And they have because they're you cast the Find Familiar spell as a ritual, and then each of these are a little bit more than the typical familiar. But again, just like familiars, they have a limited amount of things that they can do. So it's not like summoning a creature that's going to go into battle and fight the bad guys for you. And then spells. There are different spell levels, first and second spell levels that come from the different schools of magic and are open to certain classes that are brand new to the game and are associated with the Strixhaven. Alright, and then of course there's all the spell descriptions and everything. So we have Borrowed Knowledge, draw knowledge from spirits of the past, Kinetic Jolt, magically empower your movement with dance-like steps, Silvery Barbs, magically distract the triggering creature, and turn its momentary uncertainty into encouragement for another creature. Vortex Warp, magically twist space around another creature you can see. And if it fails a con save, it's teleported to an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within a range of 90 feet. Wither and Bloom, invoke both death and life upon a 10-foot radius, and each creature of your choice must make a con save and take 2d6 necrotic damage or half as much. In addition, one creature of your choice can spend and roll one of its unspent hit dice and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll plus your spellcasting ability modifier. So it kind of takes life from some creatures to give life to another creature. And then there's a couple of different magic items, and these are all common or uncommon magic items, uh, which, now this adventure is going to take you tier 1 and tier 2. By the time you are in tier 2, your character is entitled to have rare items in addition to common and uncommon items. But at first level, you're able to get both common and uncommon items, and apparently they decided that for this adventure, that's all they were going to create is brand new common and uncommon items. Now, something that I noticed that they've done here is they have provided costs. And those of you who have been playing 5e for a while and who have been behind the DM screen, you know that in the DMG, they don't give you specific costs for magic items, and not many source books that they have released so far for 5th edition have actually given specific costs. What they do is they say based on the rarity, there is a general price range that magic items fall into. So one of the things that I had to do a long time ago is I had to go and I had to create a price list that, for magic items. And then there's been so many things released that a lot of magic items I have never priced. So in my games, we have a special channel in our Discord for the games, and whenever somebody wants a price for a magic item, I double check my list. If it's not on my list, I double check what the suggested price is, and then I kind of have to do a calculation of, okay, is that like a really, really good item, which means it's going to be closer to the top of the price range within that band, or is it kind of something that's only good in certain situations, which means it's going to be a little bit less expensive. And then, of course, there's some suggested rules that I try to use about expendable items like scrolls and potions, which you use them once and they're gone. So then we have, there's items like the bottle of Boundless Coffee, cuddly Strixhaven mascot, primers for each of the colleges, a Strixhaven pennant, and a +1 weapon, and a Witherbloom primer. Okay. Then we have... So that's everything from the character options. And then we go to the actual campaign itself. And so each of these campaigns has some, or each of these chapters, chapter 3, 4, 5, and 6, that makes up the 4 years of your school, they have certain events that happen, but then they have a little bit of randomness that's really intended to inspire some roleplay. And so from that standpoint, this adventure is going to particularly appeal to DMs and to players that like a lot of roleplay in their campaigns. Now, I, as a DM, I kind of like to have a bit of action, but I also like to tailor my games to my players. And for whatever reason, the campaigns that I'm running now, in all of them, there are a lot of players that really just love to chew the scenery. They will go and they will RP with any NPC that comes along. And so it means that things that sometimes the way they're written could happen in half of a session may take us 3 or 4 sessions to get through, because the PCs or the players, they're not ready to go on and get to the battle. They want to keep talking to all these NPCs, and it's like, all right, Okay, it would feel really awkward to try to force them out of this and get them over to where they're supposed to start fighting stuff. But as long as they're having fun, it's fine. And when you drag out things like that, it does a lot of stuff for me. Number one, it means okay, there's more time for me to think about, okay, what are some of the things that are going to be coming up in the future. And number two, I can be listening for any little things that the players will just sort of make up on the spur of the moment and will drop in. It's like, oh, really? So you think that? That's a pretty cool idea. Maybe that will show up later in the campaign. I'm just going to jot that down, and when I get a good chance, I will use it. So it's fun for me because it allows me to let the players participate in building the game world without even them specifically knowing that they're doing that. And in that way, it kind of makes it a nice surprise where somebody can say, I knew it, I knew this. And I'm sitting here behind the screen going, yeah, it wasn't planned in there until you said something about it. And yeah, now this is. You did know it because you by mentioning it, you made it happen. So that's one of the cool things about running games with players that enjoy a lot of RP. Some players, they just get bored with that. All they want to do is they want to roll dice and they want to hack at monsters, and that's fine. But this may be a bit of a challenging adventure for those players. All right, so there's a you can run each of the years as a standalone adventure, but I tend to think that that's even a bit much, because there are several points within each academic year or each chapter where there are exams, and as I mentioned before, the exams have a mechanical role to play within the campaign, such that if you get really good marks on this exam, then in a certain point in the future, it's going to give you advantage in a particular encounter because of something that you demonstrated mastery of by acing that particular exam. And I think that you could, if you wanted to have this use this as sort of a template for formal training in a campaign, you might take each of these sections that leads up to a specific exam, and you might break that out as a separate adventure and have that be something that the PCs run through. Also, you can take the whole exam mechanic from this and you can apply it to all classes across the campaign within your game world, and you can then use that as kind of a template for creating formalized training that, when a character reaches a new level, maybe in your game you say, okay, yeah, you just don't automatically get those abilities. Now you have to go to Fighter University, or you have to go to Rogue College, or you have to go to, the Paladin, Ivy League school or whatever, and you have to have this training, and you take a series of exams, and then based on how you do in that, you either unlock the next features on the first try, or maybe if you ace it, you have like a floating advantage, or when you fight a certain type of monster, or when you encounter a certain type of situation, you can get advantage on skill checks or advantage on attack rolls because of how you performed in those exams. So yes, it makes something a bit complicated, but also, as I mentioned before, that's kind of a callback to the way things worked in the early editions of the game, where part of your downtime after you gained enough experience to get to the next level was expected to be spent in finding a mentor who could actually train you how to do things. And DMs were encouraged to say, okay, uh, it's going to actually cost you so many hundreds of gold in order to train and get that feature. Oh, you didn't get enough treasure to pay for that. Well, then you're going to have to keep adventuring as a lower level adventurer, even though you have this experience, until you get enough gold that you can pay for that training and advance to the next level. So it's kind of everything that's old is new again. And it's something that definitely would grate against, the instant gratification players of today. That I got the XP. I want the features. I want it now, and also goes against the conceit of 5e that you kind of have been understood to be working on these things all along as you've been adventuring, and finally reaching this level of experience is in a mechanical way representing the fact that, oh, hey, I finally figured that out. Now I can cast these new spells, or now I can use these new abilities. Now I get these, this. Now I'm finally proficient and I can use 2 weapons, or I get a second attack, whatever the feature is that unlocks at a specific level. And it's a lot less bookkeeping and a lot less paperwork, if you will, for the DM and for the players to just explain things that way. But this is an interesting way of perhaps running, or if there's something that a player wants to do with their character that you as a DM think, okay, that's not in the rules, but it would be kind of cool for their character to do. How can we explain them doing that? Then maybe you can take a template of something like a course. Maybe there's a gold piece cost for this course, and there's some sort of exam thing, and then that would allow that particular character to unlock that ability that perhaps they wouldn't normally get as part of their class or part of their build. Then there's this whole mechanic about relationships. And, you have a friend, a beloved, and a rival. And for people that have been paying attention to the different campaigns that have been released in the different source books that have been released in 5th edition, this is very similar to the ally, the contact, and the rival that you have in settings like the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Now the fact that this is a concept, or this is another expansion or another adventure that is inspired by a Magic the Gathering expansion, I don't know enough about what's happened in Magic the last 10 or 15 years to know whether that whole kind of idea of friend and rival and ally and contact, whether that's been something that somehow has worked into the game. Back in the day when I played Magic, it was just you get the cards, you build the deck, and you play against other people. And it was all about the synergies that the cards created, and the lore around the cards really didn't make any difference. So I know they've kind of gone to all these crazy things like doing the commander stuff and all that kind of nonsense. At least from back in the day when I was playing Magic, that makes the game a lot more complicated than it already was. So then there's different maps, and there's the poster map, and then there's also advice on the passage of time. Each chapter represents an entire academic year, but there's not enough detailed adventures and detailed events to take up an entire academic year. So, like there's suggested, this happens, and then a month later or, a few weeks later, this happens, and so on and so forth. And so for DMs, as you're tracking time, you have these gaps in between the items that are built in, and it goes back to how involved do your PCs want to be in role playing? Do they want to try to role play that time in between the scheduled events? Maybe there are some groups that want to do that. They want to talk about, well, what kinds of things would we be learning over this time in such and such a class? Mr. DM, Ms. DM, tell me what we would be learning. And then DM is like, oh crap, okay. So what would they figure out in their class during that time? All right, then there's something called the Strixhaven tracking sheet, and that tracks not only the relationships you have with other NPCs, but also has your report cards, and it gives you some rerolls, which is basically like advantage, and you can get out of the classes that you take. So there's 3 classes that you're expected to take each term, and based on how you do on those exams, you can get up to 2 rerolls out of that. And then you have D4s that are based on your relationship points that you have, and those D4s can be used kind of like the bless that the priest can give you, where you can add a D4 to any D20 roll to see whether it's going to help you, make the saving throw or make the attack hit with your attack or whatever. All right, and then there's extracurricular activities that you're involved in, and then there's jobs. Because yes, just like when people go away to college and they live on campus, a lot of times they supplement the bank of mom and dad with a job that they have on campus. They work at the campus dining hall, bussing tables, or they work at the library reshelving books, or they work at the stadium cleaning up after events, things like that. Then there's student dice. So you get student dice from passing exams, and then track the skills that the character can expend student dice on. And then, of course, there's this thing which they put in there because of the people that think that if it's not written in the book, they can't do it, opting out of the rules. Yeah, if this is too complicated, or if you're not running this as a full-blown campaign, you don't want to use these rules, don't use them. And then all of the extracurricular activities that you have, there's clubs, there's groups, different types of things. So there's a Dead Language Society, which the skills affected by that are athletics and Dead Languages, athletics, and history. Distinguished Society of Fine Arts, performance and sleight of hand, dragon chess, deception and investigation. Dragon's Guard, Historical Society, Arcana and History, Fantastical Horticulture, Nature and Survival, Future Entrepreneurs, Insight and Persuasion, and then a lot more. So gymnastics, silk ball, water dancing, LARP. Okay, that's meta. A tabletop role-playing game where one of the clubs is a live-action role-playing guild. Mage Tower Cheer Squad, Play Actor Drama Guild, Strixhaven Iron Lifters, Show Band, the Strixhaven Star, which is the campus newspaper, Student Mages of Faith. The campus Students for Jesus, basically, that particular organization. All right. So you have jobs. You can get or lose a job, and there's wages. So a student that works a job gains 5 gold pieces at the start of each week that they hold the job. They quit during the year. They stop earning this money at the end of the week in which they quit. So relationship points, they get positive or negative relationship points with one student NPC at that job. Represents a coworker that they're often scheduled and whom they can easily form a connection. Then they have suggested job options. And of course, DMs and players are free to come up with other kinds of options. So various different places on campus, the kind of jobs there, the biblioplex, the library, book clerk, bookshelver, cafe worker, cleanup crew, garden tender, store worker, Bosun Tavern, assistant manager, cleanup crew, campus grounds, campus magic labs, dormitories, Fire Jolt Cafe, intramural field, Strixhaven Performing Arts, and Strixhaven Stadium. And then there are exams. So years at Strixhaven are covered by each of the book's adventures, focus on notable and even shocking events. Using these rules, so each exam encounter has a studying phase followed by a testing phase. Character can approach studying any way they desire, and with that phase culminating in a single ability check of their choice. So in contrast, testing requires ability checks using specific skills. And so this is kind of a weird take on skill encounters. And if you are familiar with 4th edition, or if you've played in 5e groups that use that, skill encounters were something that were brought into D&D in 4th edition, and it's basically a narrative way of resolving an encounter by rolling on the skills that you have as opposed to rolling attack and damage rolls. So it's really useful for doing things like if there's a chase scene. I like using things like if there's a chase scene and you are either chasing a bad guy across the city, or if you are being chased by a monster and you're trying to get to somewhere that you know you have allies, then by making skill checks along the way, the party can accumulate a number of successes versus a number of failures. And if you wind up succeeding at the skills challenge, well, a predetermined event happens. If you fail the skills challenge, something else happens. And this is kind of a way of boiling that down to something that each individual character does without involving the other characters. So the study phase is one role, and then in the exam phase you have a couple of extra roles. And then there's some optional rules in here. You can pull an all-nighter, which can get 2 rerolls during the next testing phase if you succeed on the ability check, but you get 1 level of exhaustion at the start of the day of the exam. So the exhaustion can't be removed until after the exam. So basically, you get 2 rerolls, but you have disadvantage. So it's kind of like, what's the point? Studying together. If 2 or more characters engage in a group study session, each partnering character has advantage on their ability check during the studying phase. And then skipping studying, you can skip the studying phase, foregoing the chance of gaining these rerolls. Testing phase, every test will tell you, or every exam will tell you, you have to be successful at a DC XYZ on these specific skills. And that really is tied into what the topic of the class is about and those types of things. So 2 ability checks with specifics noted in the encounter, and each character's testing phase has these possible results. If you fail, you have no successful ability checks, means a character failed, having gotten fewer than half of the questions correct. You passed. One successful ability check means a character passed having gotten half or more of the questions correct, but not all the questions. And you gain 1 student die. And if you ace it, so you succeed on both ability checks, you get all the questions correct and you gain 2 student dice. There's a rule in here for cheating, and you can make deception checks and sleight of hand checks that if they're successful, you successfully cheat and ace the exam. Of course, if you're caught, then you wind up failing the exam. And if you fail the exam, the bylaws require students to attend tutoring with a junior faculty member until they achieve at least a passed exam in a different exams encounter. Tutoring can be narrated through role-playing, or you might simply inform the player of the result. And then student dice are gained from the exam as a D4 player can roll and add to an ability check that the character makes, provided the check uses one of the 2 skills featured in the exam. So, just like a lot of things, you can roll the d20, see what the result is, and then decide whether or not to add a d4, but you have to make that decision before you know whether the d20 roll was successful or not. Alright, so that is chapter 3. That's the beginning of chapter 3. Okay, then I'm not going to detail the adventures because I don't want to give away too much for people that are going to be playing, or if you're running the game, I don't want to give you too much of my opinions on it that might make you think, oh, okay, either that, yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, or no, I don't want to do that, one way or the other. I'd rather let you go through and have your own opinions formed by going through and prepping the adventure. One of the things I will say is that it does have graduated risks as you work through year by year, chapter by chapter. And the first year, there's kind of some random things that are going on that people don't figure out until very close to the end of the year. Oh, maybe there's a connection between these things. And in some cases, you may not ever figure out if there's a connection between these things. Then in the second year, you have a bit more insights, and there's a bit more deadly challenges, and they now seem to be targeted more at the PCs as opposed to the general population. Then in the third year, there's a professor that's acting really weird. And it turns out, eventually they find that there's a cursed item that the professor has run into. And there's a confrontation where they can figure out who is behind that curse. And then the fourth year is basically, okay, now that the entity behind the curse has been unmasked, they really have it out for Strixhaven. And they have created some, they've prepared this ritual that has potential to do a lot of damage. And of course, because the faculty can't do anything about it, the hero PCs are the ones that are sent to have to deal with the big bad enemy. So, kind of a nice little thing there. And then there's chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the Friends and Foes. So this is where we get into all of the new monsters that are in this source book. And there's a few of them that are, there's a few of them that are here. So there's creatures that are range from CR 1/4 and 1/2 all the way up to some pretty beefy, like CR, I think CR 10 or 11 is about the highest, because it's only 10th level characters. And no, actually, you have a CR 18, and then you have some of the founders that they don't actually appear in the adventure, but they are referenced in the adventure. And these founders, which are all dragons, they have CRs up in the 20s. So things like Beladros Witherbloom. He's nobody you'll ever have to fight, but he's kind of the patron dragon of the Witherbloom College, and he's a CR 24 monster. But you have, you have celestials, you have dragons, plants, constructs, fiends, humanoids, oozes that will wind up being monsters in here. Lots of humanoids, beasts, plant monsters, and yeah. Alright, so, and most of them are in the single digits. So, things like 1/4, 3, 4, 1/2, CR4, CR7, 5, 9, and 4, things of that nature. But one of the monsters that I was looking at that really kind of caught my fancy, because I like the fact that they're a monster that has 2 different forms. And this is the monster that I am going to be looking at on Monster Monday. And this monster is something called the Mage Hunter. Alright, so the Mage Hunter is a creature that has both a hunter form and has a sentry form. And in its sentry form, it's kind of a diamond-shaped drone with heightened ability to sense and locate mages. But once it finds its quarry, it takes on its hunter form, and the hunter form is kind of this, looks like something out of Starship Troopers. It's kind of this big, spider-like arachnid thing that has all these spikes and everything on it, and it's a pretty nasty looking, pretty cool looking critter. So it's CR 5, 85 hit points, armor class 15. It has magic sense. It knows the location of every spellcaster, active spell, and magic item within 120 feet. Gets the spider climb in hunter form, multi attack in hunter form, claw attack and tail attack. Has mage tracker, which is sentry form only, and then it gets some bonus actions. Shift form as a bonus action, it can switch between sentry and hunter form, and then reaction, it has the consume and destroy. So when it takes damage from a spell, it takes only half the triggering damage rounded down. Creature that casts a spell is within 60 feet. The creature must succeed on a DC 14 Dex save or take the other half of the damage. So it kind of reflects spell damage back at the caster, which is one of the reasons it's called a Mage Hunter. And I had kind of a busy week at work this week, so I did not really get a chance to look through Gatherer like I enjoy doing, and see if the Mage Hunter is something that comes straight out of Magic the Gathering. But I did pull up Gatherer for this live stream, and so I think maybe we can go through and see if in fact Mage Hunter is something from from that expansion. Alright, so we'll go down here. Let's see. Okay, yep, Mage Hunter. There we go. Mage Hunter is a 3 black. It's considered a horror. Whenever an opponent casts or copies an instant or sorcery, they lose 1 life. Alright, and in D&D, the Mage Hunter is a monstrosity. Typically lawful evil. And this consume and destroy, that's kind of a way that in D&D they are mimicking this. When an opponent casts or copies an instant or sorcery, they lose 1 life. So that's kind of a cool way of mimicking that feature of the monster. And it looks like they didn't use exactly the same art from the Mage Hunter card. But they used the artwork from the Mage Hunter's Onslaught card. That's interesting. Okay. Which in Magic the Gathering, that is a sorcery, a spell as opposed to a creature. But yeah, it's just exactly a detail from the artwork from Magic the Gathering. It's exactly the same image. That's kind of cool. So at least there's some continuity going on in there. I'm running a Planeswalking game on Sundays, and I started that game in the wake of the release of the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, and overall I'm kind of disappointed with the translation from Magic the Gathering creatures to D&D 5e creatures. It feels like when they get translated over to 5e, they get a little bit watered down. They're not quite as potent as they are. So I've created my own sort of system where I look at the casting cost and the power and the toughness of a creature in Magic the Gathering, and I use an algorithm that gives me basically a range of what CR that monster should have when I bring it over to D&D. And then I find a similar CR monster that already exists in 5e and basically reskin it and give it some flavor features. So I might change the damage types or damage abilities, or I might give it a type of attack in place of something that the base monster gets that makes it feel more like the Magic the Gathering card. Kind of in the same way they did this reflection ability on the Mage Hunter that sort of mimics that, taking 1 life every time the opponent casts a spell that they do. All right, and last but not least, with this particular campaign, if you will, one of the issues I have with it, and I understand why they did it this way, because they wanted to make it a campaign length adventure. I really don't like the idea that in a game where the official level cap is level 20, that you have 10 of those levels spent going through university. It feels like, okay, there's not a whole lot of campaigns that have been created for D&D 5e where the starting range of the campaign is level 10. There's lots of stuff that goes up to level 10, but there's not a lot of stuff that starts at level 10 and goes to level 20. So it feels like if you were going to use this as the first part of a campaign, then you might be wanting to take your players through a high-level sort of homebrew campaign and have this be kind of the preparation. But then it feels like half of their playing career is spent in university. Now, what I might do is I might very much streamline this, and I might take an approach if I wanted to use some sort of formal training to represent the beginning of the adventurer's career. I might chop out some of these things, use some of the mechanics, and then squeeze however long the training is into level 1, or perhaps if it really felt like it needed it, put it into level 1 and level 2. But then start the adventuring proper at level 3. And there's a reason for that. A number of the earlier adventures, such as both the Princes of the Apocalypse campaign and the Curse of Strahd campaign, the actual campaign proper starts at level 3. And there were tacked on sections of that campaign that could be used to raise characters from level 1 to level 3 so that they could start the meat of the regular campaign. So if you wanted to take that level 1 and that level 2, and in your game, if you wanted that to be kind of a formal training that would prepare the characters for the rest of their adventuring lives, you might kind of boil down and strip out some of the stuff from Strixhaven and use this as a template to build that sort of adventurer's academy, if you will, in your particular setting or for your particular games. I think that would give both you as a DM and give your players a lot more satisfaction. Okay, we're going to be going out and exploring all these areas, and we're not going to be stuck here in this one university and on this one campus for 10 levels. Because after a while, it's like running into the same NPCs all the time and doing that. That can get a little bit boring for some players. Now, of course, for other players, they would love that constant familiarity. And another advantage of making sort of a formalized training hub in your campaign is you have a whole roster of NPCs that can be ongoing allies and ongoing sources of assistance and research and things like that as the adventurers go on their careers. So maybe they all met. Maybe the conceit for the beginning of your campaign is not you guys meet in a tavern, but you guys meet in orientation. Guess what? You all are assigned rooms in the same freshman dorm, and you guys are on the same hall, and you get to know each other, and you take some classes together, and this is how the beginning of your adventuring career happens. And some events happen during your first year. You wind up having to fight together to ward off some things. You gain some notoriety, and you all graduate together. And okay, now you're off into the world, onto your further adventures. And because of that setting and that resource, there maybe are certain professors you can go back to from time to time. There's people that maybe are at the research library you can go back to, or in the laboratories, the experimental laboratories at the university you can go back to and talk to. You need somebody to give you some esoteric research on some kind of monster. Well, you can pop by the university and then go do some other stuff in town, or maybe do a short little side adventure, and then come back, and now you have this nice report that has been prepared for you, and it gives you some information that helps you on the next phase of your campaign. So that's something that I might think about doing, is making the time there a lot shorter. Now, of course, there is the whole meta, and something that is very interesting about this particular campaign is the fact that a lot of people who play D&D, the first time they learn about D&D and the first time they're exposed to D&D is when they go off to college. Maybe they had heard about D&D when they were in middle school or high school, but their parents were the kind of parents that, oh no, you can't play those kinds of games, you can't roll dice, you can't do this, that, and the other. And then you get off to college and you meet some people, and it's like, hey, you want to come play in our D&D game? Oh yeah, I've heard about that game, but I've never been able to play. And then it's kind of interesting that the campaign would center around the 4 years of a college, because a lot of D&D campaigns sometimes last about 4 years, especially if it's a bunch of friends that meet in the dorm and they start playing freshman year and they continue the campaign up until they graduate. And then their players achieve whatever they can achieve, and then because now, Bob got a job over in Michigan, and Sarah got a job down in Texas, and Jim is going off to New Jersey, and somebody else is going over to California or Arizona. Okay, well, the whole gaming group is getting broken up because we can't continue that adventure anymore, or at least not that particular campaign. Maybe everybody can get a Roll20 account. You can start playing online, but it's not going to be the same. So that's going to be a whole new campaign. All right. Well, that's about everything that I have for the first impression of Strixhaven. Like I said, I wanted this to be sort of an overview and a deep dive, but I didn't want to get too deep into the adventure so that it would provide spoilers for for anybody that's going to be playing the adventure in the coming weeks, or that it would kind of too much poison or skew or influence DMs in terms of what they think of the adventure when they read through the book. I do think there's a lot of stuff that is useful in here, but I also think that this is an adventure that's going to appeal to a certain type of player and a certain type of DM. If you don't have players, or if you're not the kind of DM that would like to run a roleplay heavy campaign, then you probably would want to pick and choose different elements out of this that would be applicable. And maybe some of those mechanics, like exams or something like that, might be cool for training montages. You might figure out a way to use that as a mechanic in your game that would allow advantage on rolls in certain situations. It's got their rules there, but then you should always feel free and empowered as a DM to take the rules that are there, analyze them, and then tweak them or twist them or change them to suit your needs for your campaign. All right. I'm going to go back over here to the chat, and I'm going to look to see if there are any questions that we have at this point. I don't think so. So what I'm going to do, I'll go back to the... I'll go back here to the slides and go through the end of, or the end credits here. I've been DM Galabond, and I run 4 different live streams on a weekly basis. I have 3 games that I DM. There's a 5th edition Planeswalking game on Sunday afternoons at 2 p.m. There's a 5th edition campaign, Sword Coast Chronicles, on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. And in that Sword Coast Chronicles game, what we do is we're telling a homebrew story, but we're telling that story through the lens of the published 5e adventures. It's based on the fact that the timelines of all of those published campaigns, according to some semi-official sources, those timelines are almost overlapping. And so the curious gamer in me said, there's got to be a reason why all this stuff is happening at the same time in the Sword Coast. But there's very little to no overlap between any of the campaigns. They didn't even start thinking about that until they wrote Storm King's Thunder, and they foreshadowed an NPC that was going to be in another campaign, being Tome of Annihilation, when you had one of the episodes in Storm King's Thunder. And that was kind of like the only crossover that they had for the longest time in any of these adventures. But my mind says, if all this stuff is happening at the same time, maybe there's an animating force that's kind of behind all of this. That even the people involved, even the bad guys involved in the individual campaigns don't realize that they're kind of dancing on the puppet strings of some bigger, badder puppet master that a group of adventurers might eventually unmask and eventually have to face. So that's kind of what our Thursday night game is going through the storylines of the 5e adventures, seeing where the common threads are, and then gradually through that figuring out what is behind all of this stuff that's happening in the world. Then we have on Saturday night, we have an old school adventure. And gosh darn it, okay, this was taken from an old slide. So we have finished up the Lost Mine of Original D&D, and we're now doing Greyhawk Saturday nights, every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. And what that particular adventure is all about is playing with 2nd edition D&D rules. And we're going through some of the classic adventures. Right now, we're working our way through the original Temple of Elemental Evil and playing that with 2nd edition D&D rules. So that's a lot of fun, and the players are kind of at a crossroads in that game where literally they've figured out there's 2 different ways they could go, and they have no idea what they should do based on their current level. And as the DM, I'm kind of just interested to see what they choose to do and whether that winds up being something that's appropriate for their level, or whether they realize perhaps too late that they bit off more than they could chew, and they should have taken another option. So that's the fun of those old editions, is life was cheap, and a failed saving throw pretty much meant that you died. Not that you took damage, but that you died. So we'll see how that continues to go. All of the live streams are simulcast on Twitch and on YouTube, and then there's a Patreon that we have. If you want to help us try to do some more stuff, you can go out there and join us on the Patreon. Oh, and the other thing that is not here on this list is the Monster Monday. So every Monday night at 8 p.m. I do a one mic show that details the history of a specific monster in D&D. And as I said, this coming Monday we're going to be looking at the Mage Hunter. And since this is a creature that is new to D&D, we're going to be looking at a property of this creature and see how that property exists in other editions of the game and in other monsters. Because one of the things I always like to do in Monster Monday is talk about reskinning a monster and turning it into something unique. And so if there's a particular property you like about the monster we're talking about, if you know the other things that have been done with other monsters, it kind of gives you a broader menu of, oh, okay, well, how might I put my own twist, my own flavor, my own change on this particular monster in order to make it something different and unique. All right, well, that is going to do it. I appreciate you guys for coming and hanging out, for all are part of the stream, and I will wish you a good night. Hope we will see you on future streams. Hope you can join us for some of the live games. And hope that you'll go and check out our library of content over on the YouTube. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening. Good night.